Operation Valkyrie. The bomb that was 12 feet too far away. The bomb went off exactly on schedule in the exact room, close enough to kill everyone inside. Hitler walked out with a ruptured eardrum and a torn pair of trousers. The man who planted it was already flying back to Berlin, certain he'd just ended the war, before anyone told him Hitler was still alive. By 1944, a group of senior German military officers, disillusioned by years of catastrophic losses on the Eastern Front and increasingly convinced that Hitler's continued leadership was leading Germany toward total, irreversible destruction, had spent months developing a plan to assassinate Hitler and seize control of the German government before Allied forces could complete their advance into German territory. The conspiracy, involving senior figures within the German military and civilian government, represented a genuinely significant, well-organized resistance effort operating from directly within the highest levels of the Nazi regime itself. Individuals who had access to Hitler's inner circle specifically because of their legitimate military rank and position. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg, a decorated officer who had lost an eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on his left hand from a severe combat injury in North Africa, emerged as the conspiracy's key operational figure, specifically because his position as Chief of Staff to the commander of the Reserve Army granted him direct, legitimate access to briefings at Hitler's Wolf's Lair headquarters in East Prussia, access that made him the only conspirator with a realistic opportunity to personally place a bomb close enough to Hitler to guarantee his death. The assassination attempt itself was embedded within a broader plan called Operation Valkyrie, originally a legitimate German military contingency plan designed to allow the Reserve Army to maintain control of Germany in the event of internal disorder or an uprising by the millions of forced laborers then present within German territory. The conspirators deliberately modified this existing, officially sanctioned plan, ensuring that once Hitler's death was confirmed, the Reserve Army could be legally activated under Valkyrie's existing framework to seize control of key government buildings, communication centers, and Nazi party facilities across Germany, providing a plausible legal and operational structure the plotters believed would allow them to consolidate power quickly before Nazi loyalists could organize effective resistance to the coup. On July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg traveled to the Wolf's Lair, carrying a briefcase containing plastic explosives, and during a scheduled military briefing, he armed the device and positioned the briefcase beneath the conference table, as close to Hitler's location as he could manage, before excusing himself from the room under the pretext of an urgent phone call, a cover story that allowed him to leave the immediate area before the bomb detonated. What Stauffenberg couldn't have anticipated was a small, seemingly insignificant logistical detail that would ultimately determine whether his carefully planned assassination succeeded or failed entirely. Another officer in the room, finding the heavy briefcase in his way, moved it further beneath the table, inadvertently repositioning it behind a substantial wooden table support that would end up absorbing and deflecting much of the blast's force away from Hitler's specific position. The bomb detonated as planned, killing several officers present in the room and severely damaging the building, and Stauffenberg, watching the explosion from a distance as he departed the compound, genuinely believed the assassination had succeeded, reporting this belief to fellow conspirators in Berlin as he flew back to join them in launching the broader coup. Hitler, however, protected by the heavy table leg that had absorbed much of the blast, along with the conference room's relatively open windows that allowed some of the explosive pressure to dissipate rather than being fully contained within the room, survived with relatively minor injuries, a ruptured eardrum, some burns, and numerous small wooden splinter wounds, along with torn clothing, injuries serious enough to be genuinely painful, but nowhere near sufficient to prevent him from continuing to function and communicate within hours of the explosion. Back in Berlin, the conspirators, having received Stauffenberg's initial report that Hitler was dead, began implementing the broader Valkyrie coup, moving to seize key government buildings and arrest senior Nazi officials, before confused, conflicting reports began arriving, indicating Hitler had actually survived the attack. This crucial delay and confusion, as conspirators struggled to confirm what had genuinely happened at the Wolf's Lair, gave loyalist forces critical time to organize a counter-coup. And by that evening, once Hitler's survival was confirmed beyond doubt, including via a radio broadcast in which Hitler personally addressed the German public to definitively demonstrate he remained alive, the plot collapsed entirely, with loyalist military units moving to arrest the conspirators before their coup could be fully consolidated. The aftermath proved genuinely brutal and extensive. Stauffenberg himself was executed by firing squad in Berlin that same night, before Nazi authorities could even fully interrogate him about the plot's broader scope, while the subsequent investigation into the conspiracy's full extent led to the arrest of several thousand people with any suspected connection to the plot, resulting in the executions of approximately 200 individuals directly implicated in the conspiracy, along with the imprisonment or execution of numerous others swept up in the regime's broader, increasingly paranoid crackdown targeting anyone with even tangential historical connections to German conservative or military resistance circles. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, though his direct involvement in the specific assassination plot remains historically debated, was implicated closely enough in broader anti-Hitler conspiracy circles that he was ultimately forced to take his own life using poison in October of 1944, with Nazi authorities publicly presenting his death as resulting from war wounds, specifically to protect Rommel's significant public reputation and avoid the propaganda damage of publicly executing one of Germany's most celebrated military commanders. What makes Operation Valkyrie endure as one of history's most significant failed assassination attempts isn't simply the scale and audacity of the conspiracy itself, remarkable as a plot organized from directly within the highest levels of the Nazi military and government genuinely remains, but the specific, almost unbearably small margin by which it ultimately failed. A briefcase moved a few feet by someone who had no idea what it actually contained, positioning a substantial wooden table leg between the explosive and its intended target at precisely the critical moment. A single, seemingly trivial logistical accident that likely prevented Hitler's death and, by extension, prevented whatever different course the war's final 10 months might otherwise have taken. If stories like this, where history's outcome came down to a briefcase moved a few feet in the wrong direction, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.